Next, solving equations. We have to solve these equations by factoring, the same as before, except this time we'll have to use different factoring techniques. Need to get 0 on one side. So I need to subtract 11n to do that. We'll be left with 3n squared minus 11n plus 6 is equal to 0. Now I can factor this left side. Now again, you have to factor it by using the trial and error method. And when you factor it, you should end up with 3n minus n minus, and you need to get your 3 over here and your 2 over here. Check it. This will be a negative 2n. This is a negative 9n. Negative 2 and negative 9 is negative 11, which is what we're looking for. So when I factor this, then I'm going to have 3n minus 2 times n minus 3 equals 0. And now I separate this into two different equations. 3n minus 2 equals 0, or n minus 3 equals 0. On this side over here, I'm going to end up with n is equal to 2/3. And over here, I'm going to end up with n is equal to 3. And so my answer then will be 2/3 and 3. I know it's a lot of work for one problem, but that's how the only way we can solve it. On the next one, we need to factor the left side and then set both pieces equal to 0. So I'm going to start with 10, which is 2 times 5, or 1 times 10. 6, which is 2 times 3, or 1 times 6. And then I go ahead and I put them in and try to find the middle term of 11x. I'm going to start with 2x and 5x. That's a minus, so one has to be plus, the other has to be minus. And I'm going to start with a 3 and a 2 right there. And when I do that and check it, 3 times 5x is 15x, 2 times negative 2 is negative 4x, 15x and negative 4x is a positive 11x, which is what we're looking for, so I've got that factored correctly. So I'm going to have 2x plus 3 times 5x minus 2 equals 0. Now I set 2x plus 3 equal to 0, and I set 5x minus 2 equal to 0. Over here, if I subtract 3 and divide by 2, I'll get x is equal to negative 3/2. Over here, after I add 2 and divide by 5, I'll get x is equal to 2/5. And so my answer then will be a negative 3/2 and 2/5. On the next one, I need to get 0 on this side, so I subtract 15x on both sides. I'll be left with 21x squared minus 15x minus 6 equals 0. Now remember the first rule in factoring is always factor out a common term first. And if you look at 21x squared, 15x, and 6, you should recognize that they have a 3 in common. So if I factor a 3 out, I'm going to be left with 7x squared minus 5x minus 2 equals 0. That's going to make it a lot easier to factor because now I don't have to deal with all the other factors of 3. Now I factor 7x squared minus 5x minus 2. Well, my factors of 7 are 1 and 7. My factors of 2 are 1 and 2. So I'm going to be left with a 3 on the outside. And this is a negative right here, so it's going to be a plus and a minus. And I'm going to have a 7x and an x and a 2 here and a 1 here. Check it by foiling. That's negative 7x. That's a positive 2x. Negative 7x and positive 2x is negative 5x, which is what I'm looking for. So I have this factored correctly. And set that equal to 0. So I know then that either 3 is equal to 0, which can't happen. We know that 3 is not equal to 0. Or 7x plus 2 equals 0. Or x minus 1 is equal to 0. And so I'll get x is equal to a negative 2/7 or x is equal to 1. And so I'll have negative 2/7 and 1 as my answers. And on the last one, I need to get 0 on this side. In order to get 0 on that side, I have to add 2x to both sides. When I add 2x to both sides, I'm going to be left with 24x squared minus 28x plus 8 equals 0. And now again, remember what I told you a second ago, if you have a common factor, factor that out first. Well, between 24, 28, and 8, I've got a common factor of 4. So I factor out a 4. 24 divided by 4 is going to give me 6x squared, then minus 7x, and then plus 2 equals 0. Now I can factor what's on the inside of the parentheses much easier, and I don't have to deal with all the factors of 24, or all the factors of 8 for that matter. So my factors of 6 are 6 and 1, and 2 and 3. My factors of 2 are 1 and 2. And so since I've got a plus here, plus right here, and a minus right here, that tells me then that I'm going to have a minus and a minus. And negative 7 is a fairly small number. It's not a really big number, so I'm going to start off by using the factors of, or by using 2 and 3 as my factors. And then to try to figure out where the 1 and 2 go, I need to put the 2 here and my 1 here. 2 times 3x is going to give me 6x, and 2 times 1 is 2x. That's going to give me 8x. That's not going to work, so I need to try something else. Let's try switching my 1 and 2 around. Here's my 3x. Here's 4x. 3x and 4x is 7x, so that's how it's going to factor. Don't forget your 4 out front here. So my equation now is going to look like this. 4 times 2x minus 1 times 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. So I know then that either 4 equals 0, which we know isn't true, or 2x minus 1 equals 0, or 3x minus 2 equals 0. So here I'll get x is equal to 1/2. Here I'll get x is equal to 2/3. So my answer will be a 1/2 or a 2/3. On the next section, it deals with the difference of squares rule. Remember, the difference of squares rule is a squared minus b squared is equal to a plus b times a minus b. So starting with the first one, the square root of a squared is a. The square root of 25 is 5. So I could factor this to a plus 5 times a minus 5. On the next one, my square root of 49x squared is 7x. Square root of 64y squared is 8y. So I can factor this to 7x plus 8y times 7x minus 8y. On the next one, 49y squared is a perfect square. It goes to 7y. 12, however, is not a perfect square. Therefore, this is not a difference of squares. Then I look and there are no common factors between 49y squared and 12. Therefore, this is prime. On the next one, when there's 4 terms, we need to try factoring that by grouping. When I have a negative out in front of these parentheses, I change this sign to a plus. Factor out a common factor between x to the third and 3x squared. That's going to be x squared. Inside I'll be left with x plus 3 minus, over on the next one, between 4x and 12, I've got a common factor of 4. And I'll be left with x plus 3 on the inside. Between each of these terms now, I've got a common factor of x plus 3. So I can put x plus 3 over here. Over on the other side, I'll be left with x squared minus 4. Now, this is not fully factored yet because right here, x squared minus 4, I've got a difference of squares. And so I have to apply my difference of squares law. And so my square root of x squared is x. Square root of 4 is 2. So I'm going to be left with x plus 3 out in front. And then x plus 2 times x minus 2. And so that will be the fully factored form of that polynomial. On the next one, 20x to the third minus 45xy squared. The first rule in factoring, as I've said many times before, the first rule of factoring is always factor out a common term first. So I need to factor out a greatest common factor between 20x to the third and 45xy squared. Hopefully we'll recognize that that greatest common factor is going to be a 5x. If I factor 5x out of 20x to the third, I'm going to be left with 4x squared, and then minus. If I factor 5 out of 45, I'm going to be left with 9. If I factor x out, that's going to just be 1, so the x is going to be gone, and then I'll have y squared. Now inside the parentheses, you should recognize that that is also a difference of squares. So 4x squared, the square root of that is going to be 2x. Square root of 9y squared is going to be 3y. And so I'm going to be left with 5x on the outside, and then 2x plus 3y times 2x minus 3y. And that will be the fully factored form of that polynomial. On the last one, 18a to the fourth minus 72a squared. Again, it's just like the one we just did. We need to factor out a greatest common factor first. Hopefully you should recognize the greatest common factor here is going to be a 9a squared. If I factor out 9a squared, I'm going to be left with 2a squared minus, actually I'm sorry, the greatest common factor is going to not be 9, it's going to be 18. It'll be 18a squared So I'm going to be left with a squared minus 72 divided by 18 is 4. And then on the inside of the parentheses, again, I've got a squared minus 4, which is also a difference of squares. So I'm going to have 18 a squared on the outside, then a plus 2 times a minus 2, since a is the square root of a squared and 2 is the square root of 4.